I never thought I'd be 72 years old, standing in the middle of an $8 million beef cattle operation that nobody wanted. The McDonald's Happy Meal sits on my kitchen counter, untouched since the day Jenny left. Some might call it symbolic. Cheap plastic toy, cold fries, and a burger that never rots. Kinda like our marriage, I guess. 47 years. That's how long we were together before she handed me divorce papers, along with that damn Happy Meal. Something to remember me by, she said. I built all this from nothing. 3,000 acres of prime Montana rangeland, 2,500 head of premium Angus cattle, 6 ranch hands who depend on me for their livelihoods. I did it all for her, because back in '78, she mentioned once, just once, that she'd always dreamed of being a cattle baroness. What you're about to hear isn't just another story about a marriage gone wrong. It's about how I poured my soul into something, only to discover I was building a dream for someone who stopped dreaming with me a long time ago. And what I found on the other side of heartbreak. I grew up dirt poor in western Montana, third generation of struggling ranchers who never quite made it. My daddy worked himself into an early grave trying to keep our measly 80 acres afloat. Mama did laundry for the big ranchers to keep food on our table. We were the family that other families whispered about at church. Those poor Caldwell boys, wearing the same pair of jeans all year round. I met Jenny in high school. She was from the east side of the county, not rich, but comfortable. Her daddy owned the local hardware store. She had this laugh that could make even the sourest old rancher crack a smile, and dreams bigger than our little town could hold. I still remember the first time I took her to a dance in my daddy's beat-up Ford. Her father looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his boot. Caldwells never amount to much, he told her loud enough for me to hear. When I proposed after graduation, Jenny's father refused to come to the wedding, called me a dirt farmer who'd never provide for his daughter. That night, Jenny cried in my arms and whispered how she'd always dreamed of running a big cattle operation, something magnificent, not the hard-scrabble existence my family endured. Someday, I promised her, you'll be the cattle queen of Montana. We started small, rented 100 acres, bought 15 head of cattle with a loan that kept me awake at night. Every morning before dawn, I'd find Jenny at the kitchen table, studying cattle journals, learning about bloodlines and breeding programs. Black Angus, she'd say, that's where the future is. And I believed her. Our first decade was hand to mouth. When our son Mike was born in '79, I had to work 3 jobs to make ends meet. The day he came home from the hospital, our best heifer died, and I couldn't even afford to replace her. Jenny never complained, just pulled on her boots and worked alongside me, even when her friends were buying new cars and taking vacations. The humiliation came in waves. Like the time Jenny's high school reunion rolled around in '88 and we couldn't afford a babysitter or decent clothes. We showed up in our work jeans, smelling faintly of cattle despite our best efforts. Her old classmate Diane, dripping in jewelry from her banker husband, looked us up and down and said, "Still playing farmer, Jenny? How quaint." Jenny squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, smiled, and said, "Just you wait." Or the Christmas of '92, when Jenny's father invited us over, only to spend the entire dinner talking about how his other son-in-law, a lawyer from Billings, had just bought a vacation home in Jackson Hole. "Some men know how to provide," he said, staring straight at me. I swallowed my pride with dry turkey. But by our 20th anniversary, things were changing. I'd saved every penny, worked every angle, and secured financing for 500 acres of prime grazing land. We were up to 300 head by then, and the Caldwell name was starting to mean something in the Montana beef world.
The grand gesture was taking shape. Not just a profitable ranch, but an empire built on Jenny's vision of premium Black Angus beef. What Jenny didn't know was the secret I'd been keeping since '81. After that first brutal winter when we nearly lost everything, I'd made a promise to myself. Every dollar I could spare went into a separate account, what I called my Jenny's Dream Fund. I worked extra jobs, sold my father's pocket watch, even quietly sold off parcels of my family's original homestead to my cousins. For 40 years, I poured everything into building something worthy of the woman who believed in me when nobody else did.
By 2015, the Caldwell Ranch had become something special. 3,000 acres of the finest grazing land in the state, premium breeding stock, and a reputation for quality that had buyers coming from as far as Japan. Jenny had become the respected cattlewoman she'd always wanted to be, hosting industry events, giving talks at agricultural conferences, even featured in Western Livestock Journal. Her father had passed years before, never quite admitting I'd proven him wrong. Our 45th anniversary was approaching that September, and I decided it was time. The final piece of Jenny's dream was a new state-of-the-art processing facility that would let us control every aspect of production and maximize profits. I'd been secretly working with architects and securing permits for months. The $2 million facility would be my gift to her, the crown jewel of the empire we'd built together. The celebration was planned at the Cattlemen's Club, the same place where Jenny's father had once refused to acknowledge me as I bussed tables there as a teenager. I invited everyone, our son Mike and his family flying in from Denver, Jenny's sister and her banker husband, our ranch hands and their families, buyers we'd worked with for decades, even competitors who'd become friends over the years. The week before the party, I noticed Jenny seemed distant. She'd taken to long drives alone, coming back with vague explanations about checking fences or visiting the south pasture. Her phone would ding with messages that she'd quickly silence. I told myself she was just stressed about the event. Jenny had always hated being the center of attention. The morning of our anniversary, I woke up alone. Found Jenny in the kitchen, staring out the window at the land we'd built together. When I put my arms around her, she flinched. "Everything okay, darlin'?" I asked. "Fine," she said without turning around. "Just thinking." I headed out to check on the new bulls we'd brought in the week before, hoping to give her some space. When I returned for lunch, I found her on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. She hung up quickly when she saw me. "That was just Diane," she said. Diane, her high school friend who'd humiliated us at the reunion years ago. They hadn't spoken in decades as far as I knew. At the party that night, Jenny wore a new dress I'd never seen, looking more beautiful than the day I married her. But something was off. She barely touched her champagne, barely looked at me when we greeted guests. When Mike asked if she was feeling all right, she just nodded and squeezed his hand. The tension built as dinner progressed. Jenny seemed to be watching the door, checking her watch. I noticed her sister giving her strange looks across the table. When it came time for speeches, our ranch foreman Joe raised his glass and talked about how we'd built something special from nothing. "Never seen two people work harder or love deeper," he said, his voice cracking. Jenny stared at her plate. I stood up next, heart pounding. The architectural renderings of the processing facility were in an envelope beside my plate. This was it, the culmination of 4 decades of sacrifice and work. 45 years ago, I began, a hardware store owner's daughter took a chance on a dirt-poor Caldwell boy. That's when the door opened, and he walked in. Tall, silver-haired, wearing an expensive suit that screamed city money. I didn't recognize him, but Jenny did. Her face went white, then flushed red. Conversation around us stuttered to silence. "Who's that?" Mike whispered. Before anyone could answer, Jenny stood up so quickly her chair toppled backward. The crash echoed through the suddenly silent room. "Richard," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're early."
The man, Richard, smiled apologetically. "Sorry to interrupt. Traffic from Billings was lighter than expected." I looked from him to Jenny, confusion turning to something colder as I noticed the way they looked at each other. 47 years of marriage teaches you your spouse's expressions. This one I'd never seen before. "Jenny?" My voice sounded strange in my ears. "What's going on?" She finally looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that day. There was pity in her eyes and something like relief. "Tom," she said quietly, "we need to talk." The room fell deadly silent. 60 people, forks frozen mid-air, watching as my life imploded in real time. "Who is this man, Jenny?" I asked again, though some part of me already knew. She straightened her shoulders, suddenly looking more resolute than I'd seen her in years. "Richard is an old friend."
From before you and I met. Richard stepped forward, hand extended like we were at some business meeting. "Richard Kessler, I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." I ignored his hand. What circumstances exactly would those be? Jenny looked around the room, at our friends, our employees, our son. "Tom, please, let's discuss this privately." Something snapped inside me. 47 years of swallowed pride, of proving myself worthy, of building someone else's dream. "No," I said, loud enough to make her flinch. "You brought him here, to our anniversary celebration. Whatever you have to say can be said right here." Our son Mike stood up. "Mom? Dad? What's happening?" Jenny took a deep breath. "Richard and I have reconnected. We've been seeing each other for the past 8 months." The room collectively gasped. I felt like I'd been kicked by a bull. 8 months, I repeated. Almost the exact time since I'd started planning the processing facility. While I was in meetings with architects, she was. "I've decided I want something different for my remaining years," Jenny continued, her voice growing stronger. "I'm leaving, Tom. Richard and I are moving to his place in Scottsdale." Scottsdale, Arizona, about as far from Montana cattle country as you could get. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that surprised even me. "You're leaving the ranch? Everything we built?" "That's just it," she said, looking around at the assembled crowd. "I never wanted all this, not really." The words hit me like physical blows. "What are you talking about? The cattle empire? It was your dream." Jenny shook her head slowly. "It was a passing comment, Tom, something I said when I was 18 years old. I didn't think you'd spend your whole life trying to make it happen." The envelope with the processing facility plans burned in my hand. 40 years of secret sacrifice for a dream she claimed she never really wanted. What about the journals, the breeding programs, all those years working side by side? "I did it because it mattered to you," she said. "You were so determined to prove yourself, to your father, to everyone who ever looked down on you. After a while, it was just easier to play along." The humiliation washed over me in waves. Everyone watching, everyone hearing that my entire life's work had been built on a misunderstanding. That's when I decided to reveal the secret. "I have something for you, Jenny," I said, my voice strangely calm. I opened the envelope and spread the architectural drawings on the table. "Happy anniversary! A $2 million processing facility, the final piece of the Caldwell beef empire." She stared at the plans, confusion on her face. "And this," I continued, pulling out my checkbook and a bank statement. "The Jenny's Dream Fund, started in 1981. Every extra penny I ever made. For you. For this." The balance showed just over $3.4 million. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Jenny's sister gasped audibly. "All these years?" I said, my voice breaking at last. "I've been saving, planning, building. Not to prove anything to your father or anyone else. For you. Because I thought it was what you wanted." Jenny's face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might change her mind. Then Richard stepped forward and put his hand on her shoulder.
"Tom," she began, "I'm so sorry." I held up my hand. "Don't. Just don't." I looked around at the faces watching us, friends, employees, family, all witnessing my complete humiliation. Then I looked at Mike, our son, who stared at his mother with shock and disappointment. "The ranch is yours," I told Jenny. "You and Richard enjoy Scottsdale. I'm done." I walked out of the Cattlemen's Club that night, leaving behind the life I'd spent nearly half a century building. As I passed Richard's fancy sports car in the parking lot, I noticed something on the passenger seat, a McDonald's bag. Some absurd last-minute dinner he'd grabbed on the way to destroy my life. The first week after Jenny left was a blur. I holed up in the foreman's cabin on the far edge of the property, ignoring calls from concerned friends and our son Mike. The ranch continued to run. Cattle don't care about human heartbreak. But I couldn't bear to walk through the main house filled with 47 years of memories. On the 8th day, Mike showed up, unannounced and determined. "Mom left this for you," he said, placing a McDonald's Happy Meal box on the cabin table. Said it was something to remember her by. Inside was a cold burger, stale fries, and a plastic toy still in its wrapper. No note, no explanation. Just fast food as the period at the end of our life sentence together. The first week after Jenny left was a blur. I holed up in the foreman's cabin on the far edge of the property, ignoring calls from concerned friends and our son Mike. The ranch continued to run. Cattle don't care about human heartbreak. But I couldn't bear to walk through the main house filled with 47 years of memories. On the 8th day, Mike showed up, unannounced and determined. "Mom left this for you," he said, placing a McDonald's Happy Meal box on the cabin table. Said it was something to remember her by. Inside was a cold burger, stale fries, and a plastic toy still in its wrapper. No note, no explanation. Just fast food as the period at the end of our life sentence together.
I laughed until I cried, then cried until Mike got worried. "Dad, we need to talk about the ranch," he said once I'd pulled myself together. "Mom signed over her half to you before she left for Arizona. It's all yours now." The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my life building something Jenny didn't want, and now it was entirely mine. "I don't want it either," I told him. "Not anymore." The next day, our lawyer Helena came to the cabin. Helena had handled our business affairs for 20 years and didn't mince words. "Jenny's entitled to half your assets in the divorce," she explained. "But she's only asking for the money in the Dream Fund. She says the ranch is yours. You built it." "Why would she do that?" I asked, genuinely confused. Helena hesitated. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Jenny came to see me 2 months ago. She was conflicted. Said she'd found someone else but felt trapped by the life you'd built together. She knew how much the ranch meant to you." "But it was for her," I insisted, "all of it." "That's the thing, Tom. Jenny told me she's known for years that you were building all this for her, and it was crushing her. She felt responsible for your happiness but couldn't keep living a lie." The revelation hit me hard. All these years, we'd been trapped in roles we'd created for each other. Me as the provider of her supposed dream, her as the grateful recipient. Neither of us brave enough to speak the truth. That night, I sat on the porch of the cabin, staring at the empire I'd built, wondering what I actually wanted. Not what would impress Jenny's father, not what would make Jenny happy. What I wanted. And for the first time in 47 years, I didn't know. The next morning brought another visitor, Joe, our foreman for the last 20 years. "The men are worried," he said bluntly, "about the ranch, about you." "I'm selling," I told him, "all of it." Joe didn't look surprised. "What then?" "I don't know." 2 days later, I discovered something unexpected. While going through the ranch office, I found a locked drawer in Jenny's desk. Inside was a journal, not about cattle or ranch operations, but filled with poetry. Pages and pages of beautiful, aching words about mountains, seasons, aging, regret. Jenny's true passion, hidden away all these years. The final entry was dated the day before our anniversary. Forgiveness is a gift I can't expect, but desperately need. I hope someday he understands I'm setting us both free. Something shifted inside me. Maybe Jenny had been as trapped as I was. Over the next month, unexpected allies emerged. Mike and his wife offered to buy the ranch, planning to scale it back to a more manageable operation while Mike continued his engineering career in Denver. They wanted to preserve what I'd built without being consumed by it. Helena connected me with a nonprofit helping disadvantaged youth learn agricultural skills. They were interested in using part of the land as a teaching facility. Most surprisingly, Jenny's sister Barbara showed up one rainy afternoon. "She's miserable," Barbara said without preamble. "Scottsdale is too hot, Richard is too controlling, and she misses Montana." "That's not my problem anymore," I replied. Barbara handed me an envelope. She wanted you to have this. Inside was a published book of poetry, Jenny's poetry, with a modest publishing house logo on the spine. The dedication page read, "For Tom, who gave me everything except the courage to be myself." 3 months after Jenny left, I made my decision. I sold the main operation to Mike and his wife at a price that barely covered the outstanding loans. I donated 500 acres to the Youth Agricultural Program with the provision they'd build that processing facility as a training center. The remaining land I kept for myself, the foreman's cabin and the 100 acres surrounding it, including the creek where Jenny and I used to picnic when we were first married. With my share of the sale and what remained of the Dream Fund after the divorce settlement, I had enough to live comfortably and pursue something I'd secretly enjoyed but never had time for: woodworking. I converted the old barn into a workshop and started making furniture. The unexpected twist came 6 months later. A letter arrived from Jenny. Not a request for reconciliation, but an honest accounting of her unhappiness through the years and her regret for the way she'd left. Richard, it turned out, was as much a fantasy as my image of Jenny had been. They'd already separated. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote, "but I want you to know that what you built was magnificent, even if it wasn't my dream. It was a testament to your character, your determination, and your love. I was never worthy of such devotion." I wrote back a single line. We were both living someone else's story. 2 years passed. I built a good life, smaller but authentic. My furniture gained a following. The Happy Meal sat on my workbench, preserved like some strange monument to misplaced dreams. Then, one afternoon, a familiar car pulled up to the cabin. Jenny stepped out, older, thinner, but somehow more herself than I'd ever seen her. "I'm back in Montana," she said, "teaching creative writing at the community college. I thought you should know." We talked for hours, really talked, maybe for the first time in decades. About regrets, missed signals, the roles we'd played for each other. About the courage it takes to change course after a lifetime spent on one path. Before she left, she noticed the Happy Meal. "You kept it?" she said, surprised. "Seemed important," I replied, though I never understood why. Jenny smiled sadly. It was the first meal Richard and I shared when we reconnected. He remembered I used to collect the toys as a teenager. I left it because, I don't know, it represented the childish fantasy I was chasing. I picked up the Happy Meal box. Well, in that case, I tossed it in the trash. Some memories aren't worth keeping. We both laughed then, a real laugh, without bitterness. Today, at 72, I stand on my 100 acres and watch the sunset over land that's finally truly mine. The cattle operation continues under Mike's careful management, scaled back, sustainable, successful on its own terms. Jenny lives in town, publishes poetry, and sometimes joins me for coffee on this porch. Not a reconciliation, but a kind of peace neither of us thought possible. The McDonald's Happy Meal is long gone, but what it taught me remains. No dream is worth pursuing if it isn't truly yours.
And no relationship can thrive on unspoken expectations and misunderstood desires. I built my wife an $8 million beef cattle operation because I thought it would make her happy. She left me with a fast food toy because she thought it would make her free. We were both wrong. True happiness and freedom come from the courage to live authentically, even when it's painful, even when it means letting go of everything you've built. If you're building something right now, a relationship, a business, a life, make sure you're building it for the right reasons. Ask the hard questions. Have the difficult conversations. Don't wait 47 years like I did. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone be who they truly are, even if that person is yourself.